All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, glory, and honor unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Haracha HaKodash. A double honors unto the apostles and elders of GMS Great Millstone, and a sincere Shalom to Yakim, bringing out this word in diligence and in truth. And these articles are from Twitter, and it's dealing with the soldiers, the Navy soldiers, stuck on that USS Lincoln, man. Basically, so I want to get into, how this falls into prophecy, man. And you may not be able to hear the words from this video because I don't have a Twitter, but nevertheless, they do pop up on the bottom of the screen if it's able to play. We're going to see. Let's see if we can do this. Come on now. Let's see one more time. Let's do this. Copy that. Boom. Just create another. Here we go. It says military officer, and he was reacting to the story in The Guardian, claiming that there had been 6 suicide attempts. It says, and he wrote in response to that, he said, finally, the truth. This is making the rounds. If the Lincoln has 5,000 people on it, and it hasn't seen land in 38 weeks and is starving, no packages, rationing coffee, waiting to die from an Iranian hypersonic missile. They say the number is 6 of 10s, yearly, nearly a year at sea, no land, etc. The real number of attempts of suicide is likely 30 or 60, right? So this just goes to show you, that the U.S., and we've always told you, man, they don't care about their own soldiers. Then why would they care about, the average citizen, right? At the bottom, you see the U.S. soldiers trying to jump overboard as hungry all time in government experiment to see how far they can push us, right? And that's just the caption. Iran War Service members. Now, when you read this, it says, families are just as frustrated as the people in the boat. This deployment is the worst one, and I pray no other boat goes through the same. Even people that have been deployed 100 times claims this one to be the worst and believe it can get worse than this. The Navy does not care. The mission always comes first. I was talking to some random dude at a smoke pit, and he was saying it's an experiment the government is doing to see how far they can push sailors' limits of being out to sea with the worst experiment. It's like with the worst experience. He says, I don't know anymore. I know my family needs me, and the Navy is not being fair right now, taking me away far longer than expected. Worst part, my expectations were already at an all-time low, but as per usual, the Navy beat those too by going lower than hell. So there's that. But this is the thing, man. We've been telling you, especially you Jakes, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, to don't enroll in this devil's army, man. He doesn't care about you. The moment you enlist, you're literally selling yourself unto him. So now what? You're property of him. Whatever he's dictating and telling you to do, guess what? You got to do exactly that, man. There is no wiggle room, right? And Yahweh Shemel Shah is so beautiful that he's had elders, brothers that have served in Esau's military and was able to get out. And they personally tell you of what they had to deal with while they were in and that you need to leave. But Jake still don't want to hear us, right? So now, guess what? Now you're on this boat starving, man. And keep in mind, the American people ain't built for war. There's a select number of individuals that are actually supposed to be fighting, man. Right? Everybody isn't supposed to be a warrior. That's supposed to be something that you're born and raised up from youth to be. Matter of fact, let's get this, just to show that. Let's get this accounted in Judges, man. Right? Because Jake don't join this military to actually fight. But then they're not paying attention to the signs of the times. Right? So when they get caught up in war, they're like, well, I didn't sign up for this. Well, yes, you did. That's like a fireman saying, oh, I didn't know I was going to have to fight a fire. Or a doctor saying, I didn't know I was going to have to do emergency surgery. Come on, that's stupid. Right? So I'm grabbing this account here in Judges 6. The account of Gideon. Because there was a point where, a lot of Israelites, were basically volunteering themselves to fight. They were volunteering themselves to fight. And Gideon said, hey, go home, man. Here we go. This Judges 7. It says, then Jerubbaal, who is Gideon, and all the people that were with him rose up early and pitched beside the wall of Harod, so that the host of the Midianites were on the north side of them by the hill of Moreh in the valley. And the Lord said unto Gideon, the people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, mine own hand hath saved me. Now therefore go to proclaim in the ears of this people, saying, whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And there returned of the people 20 and 2,000, and there remained 10,000. Now this is the thing. When understanding that you're going to be a soldier, you have to have it deep ingrained in your mind, the understanding that you may never return. Because when you take a look at other nations' armies, their soldiers are understanding that, hey, I may not come back, and I'm fine with that result. Niggas join the military here for a Hellcat. You got women in that army. Women are not supposed to be fighting in the army, man. But this is also part of the equality that the quote-unquote equality that the serpent pitched to Eve. So every woman that's in the military, a majority of them are proud. So the Lord is allowing them to go through this. And I guarantee out of the however many suicide attempts, I guarantee it was majority women. Guarantee. And I know there's far less women on that ship than men. But I know the numbers have to be more women than men. Right? But here it is. The scripture says those that are scared. Death is always going to be in the eyes of a soldier, man. There's going to always be something that you meditate on, man. You're putting your life at risk every day. See, Jake is on social media and not watching any outside news. Shit, Jake ain't watching internal news from stations like CNN, MSNBC. So let alone an RT, let alone Al Jazeera, man. Jake ain't watching none of that. Here it is, you're at peak wartime and niggas are still enlisting. And guess who has them enlist? Their mothers, grandmas, aunties, fathers, certain fathers. Now, majority of fathers, unless you come from a line of, father, grandfather, great-grandfather who was all in the military, the fathers don't typically push for their sons, and daughters, especially daughters, to go to the military, man. But moms be rooting for it. That's why you see the decals on the back of cars. Oh, proud military mom, Navy mom, Air Force mom, so forth and so on. Hey, well, now it's at the point where your kids, you may never see your children again. Because you as a parent weren't watching and discerning the times that we live in. So you allowed your kids to go and listen, sell themselves over into E. But as you see here, it says those that are afraid, right? They weren't willing to do what? They weren't willing to lose their lives for the battle, man, for the purpose sake. So if this same thing was enacted, guess what? You wouldn't have majority of people there in E's military, especially you Israelites. So now let's get to, because we understand it's more than just Jake in the military. You got all manners of nations. You got for the Moabites in E's military, man. Right? But I want to grab this in the book of Jeremiah. Because ultimately what's happening, E has created conditions in which their soldiers aren't able to, cope with. See, every other military, make sure that their soldiers, go through harsh conditions, and understand that you may go out, you may have to go without food. You may have to live in a jungle, or you may have to live in a desert, or this particular piece of the land for this amount of length of time. See, the American Navy, they're still pampered. They worried about brushing their teeth still. You think Russia soldiers, when they out in combat and war, worried about a fucking toothbrush? Deodorant? They're really out there hunting for their food. Right? But the American population has been so stuck on their phones and the luxuries of liberties. So even the soldiers, when their liberties are taken from them, they crash out. And that's what we're seeing. They went 38 weeks without touching land. And that's going to bug you out. You seeing the same people every day. You dealing with the trauma. Jake on the shit with curses. But this is what it is. It's beautiful to see. Because this is just how he is going to also usher in division. Right? Matter of fact, let's grab that, the book of House Divided. Because that's exactly what's happening, right? The minds of the American people are all for their military to be treated fairly. But he has another agenda. And ultimately that agenda, ain't helping out their citizens. And we say it all the time. Why is it that you have poor vets? You have veterans who are living on the street, who are homeless, going through all different types of mental health problems, can't get a place to stay in. And he can easily make a housing just for them. He could easily set up, an expedited process for them to, make sure that they're okay. But he doesn't. A man of war that suffered poverty. Here it is, you gave your life to go into the land of the enemy, slay them. Now you got PTSD or whatever condition, a missing leg, arm blown off, bad vision, night tremors. And now you sleeping on the street when you come back home. This is Matthew 12:25. And it reads, and Yahushua knew their thoughts and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand. And if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand? Right? So the citizens, American citizens, are rallying with their troops. Right? Because those are their family members. And they're hearing about the conditions that their family members are having to deal with while fighting, quote unquote, for this country, which is really fighting for the elite, the interests. It's like the interests of the elites. And guess what? They're pissed off. So that's causing even more turmoil between the U.S. government and its people, man. Because they're looking at it from a sense of, if you can't even treat our forces correct, then you really don't give a shit about me. And we've been telling you that. Your government doesn't care about you. They never have. You're a pawn on their chessboard, man. Really less than a pawn, because they use politicians as pawns. Right? You're like the dust on the chessboard. You don't exist. But this is causing inward division, man. The right, those conservatives, those who really believe in their Constitution, they see what's going on, and they're sick of it. He is going to fight. He has no problem fighting against his own government, and he is. So what we're seeing is in decomposition of morale, right? So I went to chat, right? And I'll read this precept first in the book of Isaiah, the 14th chapter, right? Because this precept always reminds me of the graduation song. You graduate from middle school, high school. There's a song that plays entitled Pomp and Circumstance, right? Now this is Isaiah 14:11. And it reads, thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy viols. The worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? Right? Now we understand this is talking about, Esau, Edom. But nevertheless, when you take a look at the 11th verse, it says, thy pomp is brought down to the grave, right? And the noise of thy viols. The worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee, showing that state of decomposition. Now, when you go here to ChatGPT, right, and I typed in Isaiah 14:11, does morale play into the role of this scripture? It says, yes, morale is very relevant to Isaiah 14:11. especially if we understand the verse as describing the collapse of Babylon's power and the humiliation of its king. Now we understand, ancient Babylon was destroyed by the Medo-Persian Empire, but America is modern day Babylon, man, or spiritually Babylon, spiritually Sodom and Egypt, so forth and so on, right? It says, thy pomp is brought down to the grave, the noise of thy vows, the worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. The word pomp carries the idea of what? Pride, splendor, magnificence, and arrogance, right? And these are the characteristics of who? America. Babylon had projected an image of overwhelming strength and superiority. And in the ancient Babylon, they did, as well as Babylon today. It says morale was connected to this because a powerful kingdom doesn't survive on weapons and wealth alone. It also depends upon the what? Confidence of its people, soldiers, rulers, and allies. So think about how the rest of the soldiers in the military branches are looking at this, right? Here it is, their Navy, right? In which their aircraft carriers, right? That branch, their fellow comrades are being treated like shit, not being able to have the everyday essentials on the ship. So they're looking at that and it's making them feel some type of way. Because if it can happen to the Navy, guess what? It can happen to the Air Force. If it can happen to the Air Force, that means it can happen to what? It can happen to the Marines. If it can happen to the Marines, it can happen to who? Everybody, man. Right? So you got the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, and or it's like the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines. You got even the Space Force. Shit. You even got the Space Force, man. Right? So if it can happen to one of these branches, it can happen to all of them. Right? It says when their confidence collapses, right? And that trust in their government is already gone because they're not getting what they usually receive. So when that confidence collapses and they bugging out on the ship trying to kill themselves because their contract, more than likely you got people on that ship who this was supposed to be their last deployment and they still out there, right? When that confidence collapses, the outward appearance of power can remain for a while, but internally, the kingdom is already weakening, right? Going back into the image in the book of Daniel, when it speaks about what? Iron mixed with miry clay at the feet. And what was thrown at the feet of that statue? That stone cut without hands, man. Yahweh Shai. It says, the noise of thy vows. This is particularly interesting. The verse moves from music, celebration, luxury, and entertainment to the grave and worms. In other words, celebration, pride, complacency, humiliation leads to destruction. Music and feasting can represent the atmosphere of a society that believes it is secure. And that's why the scripture says it's better to go into the house of mourning than go to the house of feasting, for the living will lay it to his heart. For sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better, right? Babylon could celebrate because it considered itself virtually untouchable. And you see that, right? In Daniel, the 5th chapter. How what? Hey, they was partying up until what? The writing of the wall appeared. And that same night, the king was taken out, right? The same night, the Medo-Persians, right, infiltrated. It says that relates to morale in two directions. High morale, we are victorious, nobody can defeat us. And that's where the pride. Destroy morale, our power is gone, we cannot save ourselves. So they end up doing what? Trying to off themselves. Babylon's confidence was part of its strength. This becomes even clearer when you connect, that's the spirit, Isaiah 14 with Daniel 5. Belshazzar, right? Same king, man, that I was just talking about. He died that same night they were invaded in Daniel the 5th chapter. Belshazzar held a great feast while the Medes and Persians were effectively at the gates of Babylon. The Babylonians were celebrating and drinking from the vessels taken from Jerusalem. Then the writing appeared on the wall. Thou art weighed in the balances, thou art found wanting. Many, many tekel parson. That night Babylon fell. So there is a remarkable contrast. Inside the city, everything is secure. Let us celebrate. The reality, the kingdom's judgment had already arrived. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing prophecy play out and Yahweh Shai making moves to internally destroy this place in every facet. Morale can collapse before physical power disappears. And we see that, right? The Navy is still strong. America's Navy is still a strong branch. But we see what? The morale of their soldiers gone. through. So the physical power is still there. But they no longer have the mind of the soldier anymore. And this is when E wants to usher in what? AI, robots, right? To replace those soldiers, right? It says this is an important principle in warfare. An army may still possess weapons, walls, food, soldiers, money, territory. But if the soldiers believe they cannot win, their effective fighting capacity can deteriorate dramatically. And that's why when the scripture speaks about the war in heaven, how the Lord said he's going to make them durst fight. Hey, their confidence is going to be shot. But the Lord is going to put the spirit in them to continue to fight. That's the difference. Showing you that, hey, you can't just defeat this man physically. It takes a divine power, Yahweh Shema Shai, to beat E. Because only the Lord can uproot E's confidence. Only the Lord can destroy E's spirit, man. Likewise, a population that loses confidence in its government, and that's what we're seeing. The kingdom against kingdom, the nation against nation, the house against house, left against right, conservative against liberal, red against blue, quote unquote, black against white, Jake against E, heathen against E, right? It says, likewise, a population that loses confidence in its government or its ability to survive can experience social and political collapse even before the physical infrastructure is destroyed. Isaiah 14 is portraying something deeper than merely Babylon losing a battle. It is portraying the destruction of Babylon's perceived greatness. And that's what Yahweh Shema Shai is making us see. He's allowing us to see, as the scriptures said, them losing their perceived greatness. Because America's army is still the top. But what you're seeing, the conflict between Iran, them standing firm, holding their ground, right? The boars of as the scripture says in the Apocrypha, man, the wild boar, right? When we were seeing the Persians fight against this hammer, the Lord is showing that this greatness in which America flaunted in was really a facade. And it was a facade for the point of prophecy. Right? It says, the irony of verse 11, the imagery is deliberately humiliating. Babylon's ruler had been surrounded by pomp, which led to music, luxury, and glory. Now he has a grave, worms, and decay. That is the reversal Isaiah wants us to see. The person who thought he was elevated above everyone else ends up underneath everyone else in death. And this connects beautifully with the following verses. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of morning? It's not talking about the spiritual demon Satan. It's talking about Esau falling from power. The theme is pride followed by downfall. Isaiah 14 isn't necessarily saying the morale itself causes judgment. Rather, morale is one expression of the spiritual and psychological condition of a kingdom. Babylon's confidence, pride, luxury, and sense of invincibility were manifestations of its larger problem. Right? It says, continuing. But that's the point. Now let's grab this precept and I'll close out the book of Jeremiah, the 51st chapter. It's Jeremiah 51. And where is it? Foreborn. (51 and 30). It's Jeremiah 51 and 30. It says, the mighty men of Babylon have forborne to fight. And when you read it, her mightiest warriors no longer fight. They stay in their barracks. Their courage is gone. They have become like women. The invaders have burned the houses and broken down the city gates. Call on Yahweh Shema Shai. The mighty men of Babylon have forborne to fight. Right? The worse treatment that they get, the more they rebel against the nation they're fighting for. It says they have remained in their holes. Their might have failed. They have become as women. They have burned her dwelling places. Her bars are broken. So the Lord is working on behalf of his elect, man. Showing us, as we know that he's in full control, man. So, just continue to watch the show, Akim. Right? The Lord is moving, man. We're about to watch the Lord work. We've been watching it, but he's about to expedite this process. So Lord willing, this lesson was edifying unto the body. I want to give all praise, glory, and honor unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Haracha HaKodash. I double honors unto the apostles and elders of GMS Great Millstone, and a sincere shalom to Yakim bringing out this word in diligence and in truth. Shalom.